Hello, welcome back to part 2 of Ho 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 God What Now, where we'll count down the 10 worst things about 2021. To help me do that, please welcome back to the stage Ian Dunt, Naomi Smith, and Alex Andreou. So we pulled our brains, think of the worst of the year. They're in no particular order, but countdowns are fun. Think of it being like the Christmas top 10, but the what lurks at the top is worse than Lad Baby. Starting us off at number 10, GB News, the TV channel whose audience figures were sometimes lower than those of Oh God What Now, which is amazing. Alex, Andrew Neil predictably jumped ship, called it a terrible mistake. It's obviously not a proper news channel, but is it doing its real job by giving clips to the radicalised right?
No, man. No one watches it. No one pays attention anymore. It's a comedy channel now.
It was
really
quite funny because I remember people saying, "Oh, it's easy to sneer, isn't it?" It is. It's very
really quite easy.
Childishly simple to sneer.
As for Andrew fucking Neil, don't get me started. You know, it's like Pandora hanging back the box and running away, going, "I didn't mean to open it. I didn't know what was in there.
No, Dan Wooden's in there. I didn't know."
Dan Wooden was like the last thing in the box.
I was like, there's fucking plague and famine, and then there's Dan Wooden. So perhaps not the UK Fox News after all.
No.
Okay, at number 9, the government's terrible police crime sentencing and courts bill. Ian, the government keeps adding amendments to it, including stop and search for people without suspicion, stopping named individuals from protesting at all if they previously committed protest-related offences. How many of these awful ideas will be amended out of it by the great bunch of lads in the House of Lords?
No, I don't know how much of a chance they're going to get to do that. And in fact, last time, do you remember when she first put it through, Priti Patel, recurring theme, fucking dreadful, the so-called libertarians, David Davis and all that, stood up and went, "Oh, don't worry about it, we'll fix it in committee. You know, let's not get too so fucking," when it went off to committee, it came back 10 times worse than it was before. Like, on that point, it is not just people with protest-related offences, although, by the way, included in this bill, if you're walking near a demonstration with super glue in your pocket, it is potentially a protest-related offence. I mean, if you have caused noise around a demonstration that could potentially alarm a single passerby, it's potentially a protest-related offence. And yet, it doesn't fucking even stop there. If you are suspected of having done things that might be considered protest-related offences, i.e., you're not convicted of any crime, they can still stick this protest ASBO on you. And by virtue of that protest ASBO, they can control the things that you say about demonstrations on social media. A direct attack on freedom of speech, one of those qualities which they did rather claim that they cared something about, which evidently absolutely stops the moment that you're dealing with demonstrators.
I mean, as somebody that was involved with organising peaceful mass demonstrations down Whitehall and outside Parliament and in Parliament Square, we're really, really worried about this bill. And actually, there is a potential to do some further amendments very, very, very late in the day. And so please do make sure you're signed up to Best Written, because we think we're going to go quite hard on one that will stop the government from stopping us from holding them to account and protesting outside Parliament.
No, I mean, now, like, unfortunately, many protests, the ones that we went on, the ones that I'm sure many people here went on, didn't actually achieve their aims. Why is the government so intent on banning it? Do they fear protest, or are they trying to appeal to people who can't get to work because of Insulate Britain? Like, what's driving this?
So it is predominantly part of their mass agenda to cut off all routes for us to hold them to account. So whether that is at the ballot box by making it harder for people to vote through the elections bill, harder to campaign, whether it is through amendments to judicial review, one of the few ways ordinary people can hold the government to account when they think that they have acted unethically, illegally, proroguing Parliament, for instance, whether it is them trying to curtail how journalists do their job and to protect sources and to try and make that illegal, or whether it is through this policing bill. They are just trying to close off any and every route that we might be able to speak truth to power and hold these fuckers to account.
I quite like alarming passers-by as well.
I think
You've always been very
you
good
can
at
still do that as long as you're not protesting. You can just, be yourself.
It's a grey area.
Especially tourists on the tube, yeah?
At number 8, it's the insurrection section and the storming of the US Capitol on the 6th of January when a Trump mob tried to literally cancel an election result using violence. This looks even more ominous a few months later as Republicans minimize or even support it. Has the GOP given up on democracy, or is it just scared of Trump? And if he were to suffer some terrible mishap, that somehow they would be like, oh, he was awful. He was awful. We didn't want anything to do with him.
No, I don't think that's how it's going. I think that party's in a fucking dark, dark place right now. And you kind of always hope for that moment, right, where a demagogue reveals themselves. Where there's just this moment of being like, fuck me, that is poison, that is absolute danger. And for most demagogues, you can point out something like that, something that breaks the consideration of them. And if that was going to happen, it would have been this. And the fact that it didn't, you can't fucking, there's no point, it's deeply alarming. Like, if you're looking at a situation where what remains the most powerful country on earth has half of its political system that has essentially given up on democracy, it is quite hard, even when you've got someone like Biden, who I think generally is a very good president. Generally, not on foreign policy, but generally is a good president. It's quite hard to sleep easily in your bed at night. And that's not something that I'm managing at the moment.
Do you remember there used to be movies and TV shows where the would-be demagogue would be caught, like, on a mic saying something awful, and it was like, well, that's him over now then. Mm-hmm. Turns out, not to be so.
By the way, I think we did really well with this idea for the second half. I think it's going to really cheer people up.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. Death of democracy. And number 7, it's the return of gorgeous George Galloway. At the Batley and Spen by-election, he got a fifth of the vote, came third after Labour and the Tories with his so-called, quote, working-class patriotic alternative to fake woke anti-British, open other quotes, Labour, closed both quotes, and his orchestra of dog whistles. Alex, do you think that he'll try again when the right by-election comes up?
I have no idea. I don't really care. There was a time when I was doing a campaign on removing anti-homeless spikes, and I thought, I'm going to be ecumenical about this. I will go on whatever channel asks me. So I went on everything, including Russia Today, and George Galloway's channel, Sputnik. I thought, just treat this like a gymnast. Wear something tight and smile a lot.
Like Boris Johnson on the zip wire.
So I get there, and it takes us 25 fucking minutes for him to say my name. Because he's going, Alex, Andreou. Like it's Andreou. Andreou. 20 minutes this went on. In the end, I went, yeah, it's Andreou. Just do that. It's fine. I mean, yeah.
Ian, it was a pretty sordid campaign. The Labour and ex-Labour left seemed to dislike Galloway while transparently hoping that he would embarrass Starmer by costing Kim Ledbetter the election. It's 2 years since the last election, almost 2 years since the change in Labour leadership. Why does the left still seem to be such an angry mess?
I don't think it's the whole of the left, in my experience.
Sure.
It's basically the sort of hardcore rump of, but they're very overrepresented online. You know, it's a nice way. I mean, at least I wake up, I make my morning cup of coffee, a Corbyn guy calls me a I mean, you know,
it's just good to know some things don't change, isn't
exactly.
it? You know,
it's kind of reassuring. Reassuring at this stage. And sort of thing,
someone has to.
One day it will stop and I'll be like, am I just losing my magic touch? And partly that's got to be that's got to be this thing of leader worship, even for a figure as sort of shambolic and silly, ultimately, as I think he is, that once you just get embroiled in that leader logic, as long as you start thinking that what is good by virtue of them supporting it, and what is bad by virtue of them opposing it, you just sort of lose contact with real objective reality. And you end up spending, an awful lot of your time calling, a sort of lower rank newspaper columnist. And that's, I would suggest, not a good way of spending your political life.
I think I've now managed to mute every single person.
No, you always think that, and then there's
every
more.
single person on Twitter with a name like Chairman LMAO. I think I've almost got them all.
I just love the image of Ian Dunt waking up, sort of opening the window like in a Disney cartoon. A little cartoon bird with Aaron Bastani's head sort of flying. La 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 la. Oh no.
At number 6, little gear change here. At number 6, it's the withdrawal from Afghanistan. A whistleblower just told the Foreign Affairs Select Committee fewer than 5% of Afghans who asked for help, many of whom helped the UK, were evacuated. Then Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab only worked 9 to 5 days. And Johnson ordered the military to evacuate animals from Pen Farthing's Nowzad charity, thus taking the place of many human beings. Ian, this was a huge story at the time, even more so, obviously in the US. Do foreign policy stories always fade away? Because it wasn't just, obviously it was a foreign policy issue, but it was also like a humanitarian issue. And it seemed at the time like this was so immense. And now, until this whistleblower, it hadn't really been mentioned for a while. And it's not as if the Taliban are just chilling. Is this just the way that these things go, that actually in political terms, as opposed to geopolitical terms, or domestic political terms, people just move on?
Yeah, because we don't really give a shit about people in other countries, especially not brown people in other countries. We've demonstrated that, surely, by virtue of the fact that we prioritize the lives of dogs over them. I mean, what more clear-cut demonstration of our attitudes towards those people could we possibly have offered? So no, we don't give a shit. And in fact, the only extent to which we did ultimately give a shit about that story was the extent that it was a story about Britain. It was about the end of Britain, sort of, and this applies to myself as well. That was one of that was one of the things that really affected me emotionally, was this is the end of a Britain that can operate overseas, that will stand up to Western values, that will stand up for the idea of individual freedom and democracy overseas, that has an opportunity of pursuing those values, and that we clearly do not have the commitment to it, or we would not just buckle and run because Washington decides that it's bored now. So absolutely no, we do not give a shit. And I swear to Christ, if we do not recognize that now about ourselves after what we saw during that pullout, we never fucking will.
At number 5, it's the culture war. I did have a joke about the fuss about Christmas being cancelled, but then Naomi came along. And it turns out it's all true. Alex, my favourite culture war story was, Lady Doctor Who drives men to violence. What was yours?
Nadine Dorries, Secretary of State for Culture and Media, telling the Parliamentary Committee that it's the government's right to audit Channel 4 and reassess whether its model is still efficient, since the state funds it. And then a conservative colleague of hers going that the state doesn't fund Channel 4, and Doris replying, I have the quote here, yes, and so, though, it's, yeah, and that. What? It was like watching someone having a stroke.
Naomi, did anything stand out for you?
I'm so sorry to people who have suffered strokes. I'm sorry for everything I said tonight. I'm on intermittent fasting. And so basically, I have to get all the drinking done by 9 o'clock. So I am blotto, genuinely out of my tree.
And we're loving it. We're here for it. Keep going. Keep going. It's absolutely fine. No, all good. On. More on.
Well, we're really getting into the swamp now. At number 4, it's the consequences of Brexit. From friction in Northern Ireland to the supply chain crisis and labour shortage, all of which came out of a clear blue sky. Naomi, many things that we thought would happen have happened. Is there anything that you thought might happen which is not yet, that actually a consequence that has perhaps not manifested itself?
Import checks. They've been delayed and delayed and delayed and are going to be phased in through 2022. So yeah, there's that. I'm pleased that business is really finding its voice now. I mean, I ran a pro-business Remain campaign in 2016. That was my effort within the referendum. And it was like getting, it was like pulling teeth to get anyone from the business community to speak out. And during 2020, it was very difficult because although they were beginning to get very panicked about the way the negotiations were going and how little time they were going to have to prepare for the eventuality of Brexit. They were also in total hock to the government for furlough payments, for bounce back loans, etc. So they just couldn't criticise them. And this year we have seen a change in that. We have seen business start to speak up, which is great. And we need more of it because, the impact is going to be on jobs. It is going to be on UK PLC. I think what we're really looking at now is this big disentangling of the impact of COVID from the impact of Brexit, and that's great. And we've got this really handy case study in Northern Ireland who have not had the shortages that we've had in the rest of GB, in GB and the rest of the UK. So I think we will begin to see a lot more clarity over what the really bad negative impacts of Brexit are that the rest of the world isn't suffering as we go through 2022.
Into the top three and I hope there's none of them here tonight, anti-vaxxers. Ian, we did a little podcast earlier in the year about the crossover of kind of the world of wellness woo with anti-vaxxers and the far right. Do you think this is a significant new political grouping, which brings together kind of left, right, and God knows what, or just a bunch of noisy wallies?
I think it could be both at the same time, can't it? And you're right, you're the first person to make that point to me. I was speaking to my German friend yesterday and saying, man, you guys have got terrible fucking levels. And I mean, she's quite a stern economist. She was like, it's the fucking hippies. And the main thing is she was just like, it's not the sort of, alternative for Deutschland and all. She was like, it's like everyone that's into sort of herbal tea is against vaccines now.
There's definitely like a lot of people I remember from the dance music scene in the 90s have gone in a less groovy direction.
Not putting that into my body.
Exactly. Well, at the time they were, of course, have you tested this MDMA? I don't want to take it otherwise.
Oh, yeah. What kind of peer reviewed trial has this MDMA gone through?
I've done my research.
It's got a penguin on it.
At number 2, sleaze and the Owen Paterson Fair, or how the government managed to turn backbench naughtiness into a national scandal. Naomi, this enraged Tory MPs who were made to look unprincipled and foolish, which they hate looking, and gave Labour a tasty attack line. Is this one of those things that will have long-term consequences? Because we often talk about a lot of things that, sometimes you think, oh my God, we talked about this so much on the podcast, and essentially nobody cares. Is this something that just sort of rolls into other stories and continues?
So I think with some of the electorate, it's baked in. The corruption and being on the make and all the rest of it is priced in for them. We saw the impact of PPE contracts for mates cut through quite well in the Cheshire and Amersham by-election, and, saw a big kickback against the Conservatives there as a consequence. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens a week today or tomorrow in the North Shropshire by-election in Owen Paterson's seat. I think it's cumulative. I think it's all of a piece of everything that we've seen this week with, the One Rule for Us and others for you, the flagrant misspending of public money throughout the pandemic, on, PPE contracts that then didn't deliver, or, money for logistics companies and shipping companies that had never owned any ships, et cetera, et cetera. I think all of that is going to have a cumulative effect, but I don't think any one of them is ever going to be enough to be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
I did enjoy the way that I'd never heard of Randox before that affair, and then suddenly I started seeing Randox posters on the tube, and somebody was going like, all publicity is good publicity, now people know who we are. And I'm just like, are you the corruption guys?
Can I say it's never a thing, right? It's never the thing that breaks down the person. It's just the way our memory compresses the past that does that. Watergate took 3 years. Cash for questions went on for 5.
Yeah.
MP expenses were based on freedom of information requests that went on 3 years before revelations began. It's just that in retrospect, we think of it as one moment in time that brought someone down. But it never is. It's always a sort of continuing, a rumbling thing that brings
It's actually
down.
it's really hard to think of anyone where basically there was a scandal and then about 4 weeks later, the Prime Minister or President or whatever was just like, sorry guys, can't do it anymore, gotta go. It doesn't happen like that, but I think maybe because we have a more accelerated, maybe sort of false memories plus accelerated news cycle, you're just kind of like, if he's still in office at the end of the month, you're just like, guess that didn't matter. Nothing matters.
Like even Profumo, it was a few months later that the Prime Minister resigned for health reasons, and that government went on for another year until it got annihilated in the next election. So it's not, we think of these things as moments in time that brought someone down, and that means you're disappointed and frustrated because you're always going, is this the thing that's going to bring Boris Johnson down? Yeah. But it's never a thing. It's just a mind play that makes us think.
But I was worried that perhaps the government had learned that you don't turn a small story into a big story by trying to cover it up. But nope. No lessons learned. Nope. It's finally time to unveil the Christmas #1, the All I Want for Christmas Fairy Tale of New York Sleigh Bells Mega Mix of 2021 awfulness. And it is The Wandering Hands of Matt Hancock.
Quite a reaction.
Ian, what made this such...
I don't even know what the question is. I don't want to fucking answer.
Who did this list?
He did a sex.
Seriously, who did this list? Who thought Matt Hancock cupping his mistress's buttocks was worse than Brexit?
No, it's not in order.
Anti-vaxxers.
It's not in order. It's not in order.
Oh, right.
It's entirely,
Okay.
arbitrary. It's called fun, Alex. Right. Try it sometime.
Who was #1?
Oh, I'm sorry we're not a think tank.
#1. It's a countdown.
Ian, why did this burn itself into the retina and brains and dreams of a nation?
Oh, because of the image. And the bit that I can't get rid of is the way he checks. Do you know when he checks the door to see if anyone's coming before? It's not the groping. It's the checking. For some reason, it just ruined.
Just too organised.
Yeah,
not spontaneous enough.
I don't know, the way he did it. It was like a little Lego man. Yeah. And I just I actually haven't been able to forget it. And I think Roz said this thing in quite a critical way, I think, in the podcast. It's sort of going, part of this is our natural physical disgust, and it's playing into our moral indignation. And you know what? She was fucking 100% right.
No, but that's
how I feel.
No, but that's a weird thing, because actually I think what's happened today with the Allegra Stratton thing, the freeze frame of her laughing.
Yeah.
And she wasn't laughing at the British people. That wasn't what was going through her head at that moment. But that's the image. And it is interesting that there are sometimes consequences, and that a lot of the time that does come from a video. Mm-hmm. It does come from an image which somehow kind of cuts through to something really visceral.
She was laughing, in my view, out of exhaustion at having to deal with a fucking man baby upstairs. That's what I got from it. She was going, I don't know, man. I just want to die.
So, those are the worst things of 2021. Be that 2022.